The early evening news now on BBC One Wales with Jane Hill.
Boris Johnson says the pressure on hospitals will be considerable over the next few weeks and maybe longer because of COVID. But the Prime Minister says the country should continue on its current path despite the challenges caused by the Omicron variant.
The pressure on our NHS, on our hospitals, is going to be considerable in the course of the next couple of weeks and maybe more, because there's no question that Omicron continues to surge through the country.
As many children start a new school term tomorrow, the government says all secondary school pupils will be tested before returning to classrooms in England. A legal document signed between Virginia Giuffre and Jeffrey Epstein 12 years ago has just been made public. It's potentially key to her civil case against Prince Andrew.
Guys, you can come through.
And getting to school in safety, the trial scheme that gives pupils an adult chaperone in high crime areas. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the BBC News at 6. The Prime Minister has warned that the pressure on the NHS in England is going to be considerable in the coming weeks, but he's insisted that the way forward for the country is to continue on the current path of COVID measures. It comes as the Education Secretary says the government is determined to keep schools open after learning a painful lesson from earlier closures. Nadeem Zahawi confirmed that all secondary pupils in England will be tested before resuming lessons, with the first pupils due back at school tomorrow. Labour has accused the government of not doing enough to reduce transmission and keep schools open. Here's our health correspondent, Catherine Burns.
Hello, how do you do? How are we? Happy New Year.
Another day, another visit to a vaccination centre for the Prime Minister.
How was that? You're just so good at it, you barely feel it.
Other parts of the NHS are really feeling it, though. We're hearing that around 6 trusts, including the United Lincolnshire Hospitals NHS Trust, have declared critical incidents in the last few days. This happens when they're worried that they can't provide all the critical services they need to.
Looking at the pressures on the NHS in the next couple of weeks and maybe longer, looking at the numbers of people who are going to be going into hospital, it would be absolute folly to say that this thing is all over now by the shouting. We've got to remain cautious, we've got to stick with Plan B, we've got to get boosted.
In other words, no new restrictions in England at the moment. Expect to hear more focus on booster jabs, though, and NHS staff could be redeployed to help the busiest areas.
It's not unusual to hear that the NHS is under pressure in January. Winter always brings with it extra patients, and COVID is adding to that. This year, though, there's another complication: the number of staff who are off because of the virus. Now it's understood several hospital chief executives in England are saying their trusts are under the greatest sustained pressure they've seen.
There are now more than 14,000 patients with COVID in hospitals in England. That's up almost 70% in a week.
I've spoken to staff who do find treating unvaccinated patients who are seriously unwell, they do find that upsetting, particularly if, as from time to time, the patient then says, actually, I wish I'd been vaccinated all along. But we're not here to judge, we're here to treat, and we'll treat whoever comes and requires our care and our attention.
There are some early encouraging signs, though.
I was talking to London chief execs last week. What they were saying is they were seeing some very concerning daily increases of the numbers of people coming into hospital. 9%, 15%, 9% on the 27th, 28th and 29th of December. But interestingly, in the last 2 days, those numbers have dropped, the increases to 1% and 2%.
Back to school this week and back to masks in classrooms for secondary pupils in England. This brings them into line with the rest of the UK. Labour says there still isn't enough focus on fresh air in classrooms, though.
We've known now for 18 months that it will be essential to make sure that classrooms are properly ventilated. Yet all we've seen from the government are 7,000 devices to be rolled out across hundreds of thousands of classrooms across England. It just isn't good enough.
Ministers will look at rules about masks in schools again at the end of the month. Catherine Burns, BBC News.
Well, as we heard there, a critical incident has been declared at hospitals in Lincolnshire because of COVID-related staff shortages. Our correspondent Danny Savage is at Lincoln County Hospital. What are they saying there, Danny?
Jane, this started on Saturday night when the critical incident was declared by the authorities here at the hospital at 4 sites across Lincolnshire, Lincoln, Boston, Grantham and Louth, and a suggestion that they didn't have enough staff to carry on doing some procedures safely. They have updated that this morning and they're saying in spite of the challenges, essential services are fully open, and the message is to people in this region that if you do need to come to a hospital, don't shy away from doing so. Do come in. There will be enough people to deal with those essential services and urgent cases. They say the significant staff absences are down to the number of staff who have COVID-19 at the moment, also people that are having to isolate from being in contact with it or are recovering and are sort of having to stay away from everyone for a week or so. That means they can't come to work. It's not a unique situation. We are seeing other hospital trusts affected by this as well, about half a dozen, and it is a theme that many feel that we'll see more of in the coming weeks, of more critical incidents being declared because more and more medical staff are getting COVID and not being able to come to work. It's going to be a problem for the next few weeks to come, is the feeling across the health service at the moment, Jane.
All right, thanks, Danny. Danny Savage there in Lincoln. And just to remind you, you can find out how the NHS is coping wherever you live by using the BBC's online NHS tracker for an indication of A&E waiting times and how busy local services are in England, Wales and Scotland. You can visit bbc.co.uk/NHS tracker. Well, due to the holiday period, the government's latest coronavirus figures aren't complete, but we can bring you these. There were more than 157,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That figure is for England and Scotland. On average, nearly 170,000 new cases were reported per day in the last week. 42 deaths were recorded, as ever. That's of someone who's died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. That figure is England only. And on average, in the last week, 126 deaths were announced every day. And in terms of the vaccination programme, more than 34 million people have now had a booster or third dose, which means nearly 60% of people aged 12 or over have had their booster jab. Well, let's discuss all of this and the politics of it all. Our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus joins me. So there are again some pretty high figures, Damien, yet the government, it seems, is very much wedded to this idea now. There's to be no change of tack.
That's right, Jane. What we can say tonight is that the Prime Minister, for all the talk that there might be new restrictions after Christmas or around New Year, he tonight is saying very clearly he does not want to bring in new restrictions in the coming days, despite what we're seeing with those figures of cases surging, as he said, the pressure on hospitals. The reason he thinks that those cases are more mild and also that we see from the Labour Party, they're not really calling for more restrictions either. Their criticisms are all around basically the implementation, the measures being taken in schools that they could have been done earlier. The political problems for the Prime Minister really could come if he tried to bring in new restrictions from his own backbenchers. Remember, there was that big rebellion before Christmas. That was seen as his lowest political point since coming into office, and the questions then were really around his competence. So the issue in the coming days is likely to be what happens in schools and hospitals. How will they cope as we get into January and as we see more cases coming?
All right, Damien, thank you. Damien Grammaticus in Downing Street. A $500,000 legal settlement signed by Virginia Roberts Giuffre and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in 2009 included an agreement that Miss Giuffre wouldn't sue anyone connected to Epstein. Lawyers for Prince Andrew say the agreement, which has been made public in the last couple of hours, releases the prince from liability in the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre. who accuses him of sexually assaulting her when she was 17. Prince Andrew has consistently denied the claims. Our legal correspondent Dominic Casciani is with me. Explain more then about this document, what it says, Dominic.
Yeah, so this document dates from 2009 when Virginia Giuffre, also known as Roberts, was suing Jeffrey Epstein, saying she'd been lured into a world of sexual abuse and then effectively farmed out to Epstein's closest friends, including, in her words, royalty and politicians. Now, the case never got to court because Epstein offered her $500,000, about £371,000. She agreed to take the cash as a settlement to drop the action. And in doing so, she signed an incredibly broad release deal in which she said that she would release and forever discharge Epstein and any other person or entity who could be a potential defendant in her claims against him. Now, that's incredibly important in this case because of what the Duke's lawyers saying this deal exists, and while he denies any wrongdoing, that effectively there is no liability for him to meet because she's already signed away her rights.
Right, so what happens now? There's more tomorrow.
Yeah, because this is going to become effectively the heart of a potentially explosive hearing tomorrow in Manhattan. Her case against the Duke is in a New York court. His lawyers are going to waive this in court tomorrow and say, aha, here we go, this case has to stop. It has to stop now. Her attorneys are going to say, no, not at all, because this deal from 2009 is so broad and it's nothing to do with Prince Andrew. This case has to progress. So a judge in that court's got a very, very difficult decision tomorrow. If the case progresses, then the Duke is under increasing pressure to actually disclose evidence which will either meet or dispute what she's saying. But of course, if he wins, then the case will come to a halt.
All right, Dominic, thank you very much. Dominic Casciani. A 15-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of another 15-year-old in South London last week. Zain Amarlina was stabbed in a park in Croydon on Thursday. The teenager who's been charged can't be named because of his age. He'll appear before magistrates in Bromley tomorrow. More than 28,300 people crossed the English Channel to the UK aboard small boats in 2021. That is triple the number for 2020. That's according to figures compiled by the BBC. The last 12 months have also seen smugglers packing more and more people onto larger dinghies, sometimes with fatal consequences. A Home Office minister said the government is reforming its approach to asylum through its new plan for immigration. A fire that devastated the South African Houses of Parliament yesterday has flared up again. Firefighters in Cape Town have been trying for a second day to extinguish the blaze after it was previously declared under control. A 49-year-old man has been charged with arson and is due in court tomorrow. No one has been hurt in the fire. Now, back here, in some high crime areas of the country, children are being helped to and from school by adult chaperones. The scheme is based on one in Chicago and it's currently being piloted in the West Midlands. The schools involved have been chosen based on police intelligence. As our Midlands correspondent Phil Mackey reports.
Yeah, guys, you can come through, you can come through.
It's just a flood of
children. Thank you.
Towering above the children, leaving the Art Bolton Academy in Spark Hill in Birmingham, is Callum Dunn.
All right, guys, you want to come through?
He works for MAD, or Make a Difference, and he's one of a group of chaperones who keep students safe on their way into and out of school.
The chaperones are in the prominent places, if you like, so they're easily identifiable by the students. They're on key routes home and also in areas that we know are known hotspots. So they provide a refuge. So if there are students who feel they're at risk, who feel that they're vulnerable, they can see those chaperones. They're marked out MAD on their jackets, and then they can approach them, and then the chaperones can make sure that they feel safe.
His school is one of more than a dozen across the West Midlands, which is taking part in a pilot project called Step Together. In each case, the children have to use routes to and from school where drug dealing and gang crime are problems.
Thankfully, none of us have ever been involved in such violence across the streets, but we do know that obviously there are people out there, there are the dangers of the world out there, and you want to be protected in such situations. So the fact that these chaperones are out here now, it does make everybody feel 10 times safer.
I think that every student should get the chance to go home safely and not have to worry about anything like that. And it's more scary to go to a stranger and ask for help, so to know that there are trained professionals there, that we know that they're there to protect us, then we can go to them.
The walk to and from school can be perilous for teenagers in big cities. An 18-year-old was stabbed to death barely a mile from here a few weeks ago.
This park is just a couple of minutes walk away from the school, so lots of people will congregate here and they might play football or cricket in the summer, but it's also a potential dangerous flashpoint because there's a lot of criminal activity here as well. Drug dealing, weapons have been stashed here, so that's why the chaperones come, not just to act as a point of reassurance for the children who use this, but also as a deterrent to the criminal activity.
We found a machete into the Ackers Woods just up there.
Callum Dunn's brought me to the park that he and the other chaperones patrol after school. It's known as the Ackers and is right next to the Art Bolton Academy.
When bad things happen, it's not often in the eyesight of the public. So that's why green areas and big parks like this are often places where a lot of things will happen out of eyesight.
Callum says that because they spend so much time with the children, they get a sixth sense if something's wrong and can immediately detect if there's likely to be trouble. If it's a success, it's hoped these chaperones could become a more common sight elsewhere in England and Wales. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Birmingham.
Now, the Queen will celebrate her Platinum Jubilee this year when she becomes the first British monarch to reign for 70 years. National festivities will take place in June during a 4-day bank holiday weekend. Our royal correspondent Daniela Relf has been looking at the significance of Jubilees.
First came the silver.
The gold coach was on its way to St Paul's and a service of thanksgiving.
"25 years later, it was the golden. More recently, the diamond. The Queen is a veteran of a Jubilee. Brian, Christine and Dave, neighbours on Park Street in Salisbury, which looked very different 10 years ago. The team photo. The residents of Park Street held a Diamond Jubilee street party in 2012. But it was much more than that. The months of planning brought neighbours together. New friendships were made. Community spirit was strengthened.
It's your sense of identity and belonging to this nation, as it were. You know what I mean? I'm Welsh, but it didn't matter. She's our Queen. It's that feeling and getting together, one big family, as it were.
Well, one big memory is the colourful tables bending, groaning under the weight of the food. There was definitely no shortage of cakes and colourful foods.
Brian, no one's lived longer on Park Street than you have, but it was transformed that day. What was it like here on the day?
Well, not seeing any parked cars was rather nice. Yeah. And in this nice big open street where we had tables and chairs and bunting and people enjoying themselves.
The Milford Street Bridge mural was created in Salisbury for the Diamond Jubilee after people here were asked for their royal memories. Each image represents someone's recollection, a permanent reminder of royal history.
This year, Salisbury and communities across the UK will turn their mind to the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, where much of the focus will be on creating a lasting legacy to mark the longest reign in British history.
And this year, that lasting legacy wants us all to get planting.
You stick all these things in.
Back in October, the Queen met local school children and launched a tree planting season on her Balmoral estate.
Thank you very much. That's very kind.
It's part of a UK-wide project to get trees planted to mark the Platinum Jubilee, alongside a 4-day bank holiday weekend in June for a national celebration. Jubilees are markers of history. They're also a chance to party, to remember and to connect. Perhaps never more so than this year. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Salisbury.
And there's more throughout the evening on the BBC News channel. I'll be back with the late news here at 10. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news wherever you are. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.